Hey friends, this is Mike. Welcome back to the Soul Unleashed podcast. It's been a couple weeks since I've done an actual podcast. I was gone on a trip with the American Legion. It's a charity ride I do every year. I thought I could do the podcast while I was traveling, but I could not. It was just really way too busy. So for those of you listening on the audio-only app, I just want you to know this is also being broadcast with video. I'm doing it on YouTube also because I've got some slides that help me get across some of the concepts for today. So the concept today is, why do we pray for the dead? And that question really came up. I was recently reviewing a audio of a session that I did a couple of years ago with a medium. Her name was Rebecca Rosen. And Rebecca is very talented. She's an amazing person. She's one of those mediums to the stars. And I couldn't afford Rebecca by myself. I did it with a session with 8 other people. And as part of that session, Rebecca mentioned to me that Matt, my son, came through. And one of the things she passed on to me was that he said that I was praying for him, which was great, and that he wanted me to continue praying for him because it helped him. At the time, I really didn't think much about that. But since that time, that was in November of 2020, since that time I've had a lot of time to think about prayer, and especially as I've been doing this podcast and written my book. And why do we pray for the dead is what I started wondering about. And so what I want to do is go through some of the points today. Generally, the concept of praying for the dead is a deeply rooted belief held by a lot of major religions, but the way it's interpreted kind of reflects the diverse beliefs across these religions. Not everybody believes that we should pray for the dead, nor does everybody believe why we pray for the dead, what happens, okay? So I want to start with, I'm going to cover basically 3 religions. Eastern religions, Judaism, and then Christian religion, okay? So 3 kind of segments of religions. Eastern religion I'm going to look at very briefly, but what they think about praying for the dead. Judaism has its own special way of looking at it, and Christian, I broke it down into Protestant and Catholic traditions. So, looking at Eastern religion first, in Eastern religions they do pray for the dead, but basically they want to help people after their journey, or through their journey after death. And it's a way to maintain a connection between the living and the departed. In Hinduism, they have something called I'm not even going to pronounce this correctly, but the Shraddha and the Pitru Paksa. They're performed to honor their deceased ancestors. And these ceremonies involve offerings of food and prayers to ensure the peace and progression of souls in the afterlife. Anyway, the point is they believe these rituals can help the departed achieve a better rebirth or liberation from the cycle of reincarnation. So reincarnation is a big thing. Under Buddhism, they also offer up specific prayers and they have festivals. But again, the belief is that merit generated through these acts can be transferred to the deceased, helping them attain a more favorable rebirth or progress towards enlightenment. And I just want to point out Taoism, which is the last one. Again, they've got their own ceremonies, and they're conducted to guide spirits to the afterlife, but they're based on the belief that the living can influence the fate of the deceased through prayers and offerings, helping them to find peace and avoid negative rebirths. So basically, the practices of Eastern religion, all 3 of these, Taoism, Hinduism, and Buddhism, believe that there's a rebirth process involved. And that's not a big surprise. That's what I've learned about Eastern religion also. But they're praying to help them find positive rebirths that they go into, positive lives that they move on to. And that's very different from what you'll see in terms of, especially Catholicism, what Catholics believe they're praying for when they pray for the dead. So anyway, Eastern religion, they want to positively impact the spiritual journey of those who passed away. So let's take a look at Jewish tradition. Now, I really wasn't sure about Jewish tradition, and I actually called and spoke with a rabbi friend today because I wanted to better understand what they believe and what they do. So there's a number of mourning rituals that involve specific prayers and practices to honor the deceased and provide comfort to the bereaved. There's a thing called the Kaddish, which is a prayer praising God, and it's recited by mourners for 11 months following the death of a close relative. My rabbi friend told me that what they do after the 11 months is they all get together again at the gravesite where the person passed away, and that he interpreted it as mainly a way to help the living. So the prayers and the mourning part kind of ends after 11 months, but he sees it as a way to help the living, which is wonderful. But I saw where they talked about the concept right here of elevating souls in Judaism. So I asked him, what does that mean, elevating souls? If someone's already in heaven, can you elevate them higher or closer to God, or what does that mean? He clarified for me that, first of all, in Judaism there is no hell, right? If you do something bad in life, you will be reborn into another soul, another body, and have to work things out in that next life. I asked him if that was similar to karma, and he told me that it was, although he didn't use the word karma, but he said yes, the concept is similar, that you die in this life, you go on to the next life, and that's where you work out issues, things that you did wrong in this life. That is very, very different, obviously, from, say, Christianity, where, of course, there is a belief in hell and punishment when you die. But the really interesting thing that he explained to me was that this rebirth is similar to reincarnation, that you will have an opportunity to come back and be reborn. Some of the things I read said that this was mainly just a practice as part of the Kabbalah. However, he assured me that it was generally a mainstream Jewish way of belief, and that the point is you want to pray for people to have them move on to, when you're elevating them towards their next goal, their next soul that they're going to move to. I was really struck by the similarity, honestly, of the Jewish religion and the Jewish tradition and the Eastern religions I just talked about, where they're talking about moving on to another life, another rebirth, a reincarnation, and that's what the prayer is for. Let's take a look at Protestant religion. This is part of Christian. So Christian religions, I'm looking at both Protestant and then Catholic. There's a huge difference in the two, all right, even though they're both Christian. I mentioned some denominations here: Baptists, Methodists, Anglicans, Lutherans, and others. Most Protestant religions focus their prayer on the well-being of those living and those in mourning, and not the people that have passed. I never really gave much thought to this, but for example, Baptists typically believe that after death you face judgment, and you're either in heaven or you're in hell. And when that judgment happens, that's the state of your soul. It cannot be altered by prayers or actions of the living. And this belief is rooted in the understanding that salvation is determined by one's faith and relationship with God during your lifetime, and not by any after-death intercessions by people who are living. So their prayers, this is the example of Baptists, but it also is generally true for most Protestant traditions. Baptists focus on praying for the comfort and support of the bereaved rather than the deceased themselves. I have had discussions about this kind of thing with some of my wonderful Protestant friends whom I love and respect, and I can confirm from those discussions that yes, they believe that once you die, you're judged and it's over. Basically, there's nothing that anybody on earth still living can do to change what's happened to you because you made those decisions when you were living. And finally, which is, I'm saving it to last because it's really quite involved, is the Catholic tradition. So Catholics believe in some place called purgatory, and that is a place of purification for souls that are not yet pure enough to go into heaven. Purgatory is a lot of people don't nobody understands how the heck this really works, but basically you can offer masses, recite the rosary, perform acts of charity in the name of a deceased person, and then the church teaches that these prayers can aid souls in purgatory, helping to cleanse them of temporal punishment due to sin. There's a concept in the Catholic faith called the communion of saints. This concept is that everybody's praying for everybody. So there's the church on earth, there's the church in purgatory, and there's the church in heaven. And those three different states, they've got names for them, but those three different states all work together to move people from earth through purgatory to complete communion with God in heaven. And so the saints can pray for people on earth. The people in purgatory, they can't do anything really. They're just waiting to be prayed for so they can move to heaven, join the saints. But that system or concept, if you will, communion of saints, refers to all three of those different parts of the church. Pope John Paul II here, he emphasized that the most powerful prayer for the dead in Catholic tradition is the Mass. Here's purgatory. And this is just an example or a picture of purgatory, but here's all the souls, and they're trying to move up to heaven. And there's been many concepts. I did a little research on pictures of purgatory. It is, of course, amazing and not surprising about how artists throughout the years, throughout the centuries, especially during the Middle Ages, portrayed purgatory. But there was a priest here named Father Richard Lamore, and he wrote about purgatory. He basically said that our hearts are not ready to experience the fullness of love that God's prepared to have us experience. So in order to get our hearts purified, we need to go through this purgatory experience. He likens it to saints. Now, I'm sharing this with you because this is what I've discovered, but I must honestly say this is not necessarily what I'm clued into or believe. But he said that in order to become a saint, people that are on earth that are purified and go right to heaven, those people suffer here on earth. So they suffer they suffer physical punishment, they suffer emotional punishment, but they suffer here on earth to get to where their soul is pure enough to become a saint and go to heaven. Since most of us don't experience that pain that saints experience, we have to experience it in purgatory before our souls are cleansed to go to heaven. He calls it dross, like the dross needs to be burned away, just like it was in the lifetime of those great saints. So anyway, he says, though, that if he was to wind up in purgatory, he'd be very happy because he knew that he was on his way to heaven eventually. And then there's another concept I want to cover, which is indulgences. And this really gets me thinking. Indulgences are a means of reducing the time that you spend in purgatory. Okay? Now, if you're in purgatory, like I said, there's nothing you can do. But you can do stuff here on earth, this is according to the Catholic Church, that can reduce the time of temporal punishment. Now, temporal punishment is something different from eternal punishment. Eternal punishment is eternal damnation or hell, right? So you can gain an indulgence here on earth by doing things like, there's an example here, you can go to confession, you can visit cemeteries, you can do specific prayers, pilgrimages, good works. Those things that you do supposedly reduce the amount of time that you have to spend in purgatory. Cool thing is, according to the church, is that you can do stuff to help people in purgatory get out of purgatory and go to heaven sooner. So, for example, from November 1st to November 8th, Catholics can gain a plenary indulgence. Now, a plenary indulgence is when it's a get-out-of-jail-free card from purgatory. Okay, so if you're in purgatory and you get a plenary indulgence, that means everything's resolved and you're on your way to heaven. From November 1st to November 8th, Catholics can gain a plenary indulgence for a deceased individual by visiting a cemetery and praying for the dead. Additionally, on November 2nd, which is All Souls Day, I think, a plenary indulgence can be obtained for the souls in purgatory by visiting a church and praying an Our Father and the Creed. Okay, so I guess that if you're a soul and you're in purgatory, that must be a big day, a big day in purgatory because everybody that prays gets plenary indulgence for the souls in purgatory. Who knows how it works, right? I'm bringing this up because the Catholic Church has a very they got a system, okay? So whereas Judaism and all these religions are praying for the next life, Catholic faith doesn't believe in a next life, but they do believe in this temporary train stop on the way to heaven, purgatory, that you've got to get purified there and eventually move to heaven, but you can get a ticket out of purgatory by people praying for you on earth. So it's more than just praying for the people left behind. It's also praying to get, I'm not laughing, but it's also praying to get people, out of purgatory. So that's the answer for me of why do we pray for the dead, okay? I don't know why, honestly. I don't know why my son asked me to pray for him, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure who to pray to. Okay. Now, do you pray to God? Do you pray to Jesus? Do you pray to Spirit? Do you pray? I pray to God for my son. Okay, and I ask that he be happy and that he be peaceful and that he get to wherever it is he's trying to go. I'm not sure how my prayers help him. I'm not so sure it's this whole thing like the Catholic Church describes, that he's wrapped up in this system and maybe he's in purgatory and he wants me to pray for him to get him out of purgatory. I guess I could do that with one visit on November 2nd. But I don't know. I don't know how it works, and I don't think anybody does. But I just wanted to point out to you the differences of how different religions address this topic, and when you talk about praying for the dead, what does that mean to you? And maybe do some research for your own religion. When you're praying, what does that mean for you? Certainly helps you, but what does it do for your loved one? That is it for this podcast. Thank you very much for listening. Again, it's on YouTube where I've got the slides up there, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye-bye.